Hello, I'm Danielle, and I'm an alcoholic and codependent and food addict and a lot of things. Very grateful to be here to be sharing my experience. This is something that I feel very passionately about because I came into the rooms of AA and I really had no idea how to differentiate the truth from the false. I was in a fog. I was just like, oh my gosh, I have this problem. I can't stop drinking. What am I going to do? And all of my focus went towards the problem. And because of the steps and the fellowship, and I just tried to put the problem aside once I understood it a little better. And I tried to just focus on having this spiritual experience that they talk about in the big book of AA. And that was the solution, right? That was the solution to all of my problems. But at the time I came in, I was praying to a God that I was disconnected to. I had a belief in God, but I had no access to the power. And that was a big dilemma, right? So I just started doing whatever people told me to. I was relapsing every so often, going through the steps. I had my last relapse on my fifth step because I was so delusional that I really could not differentiate the truth from the false. I believed my own lies. I believed that I was justified in showing up as a really crappy person, and that because I wasn't drinking, that was good enough. And it led me to have my last relapse when I saw the truth in front of me for the first time, and I couldn't deny it anymore. It was a real wake-up call, and the pain was so great, right? That I was powerless. I had no choice but picking up. And they say in the big book, you have this faint idea that it's not such a good idea. And I remember at that time thinking to myself, this is not going to be a good relapse. Like, this is going to be like one of the worst. And sure enough, it was. It was one of the worst, but it was one of my last. It was the last. I ended up, going out on a bender, and I was a picker, and when I would get high, I would pick my face, and I had scabs all over, and I was like bleeding, and I was so embarrassed. Like, my sponsor was telling me to go to a meeting, and I was like, I can't leave my apartment. Like, I was just so wounded. And and um that was the end of like my last debauch, right? I went into 6 and 7, and I kept going through the steps, and I did what I had to do. I was getting medication from a doctor, Adderall, and I was believing that it was okay because I had a prescription. I was showing up to meetings and telling everyone that I was sober, and it was so obvious that I was not sober because I was like on this amphetamine. But I really believed it. I really believed that I was sober. And when my sponsor finally, when I told her and during my fifth step, she was like, Danielle, I did the same exact thing. She was a nurse, and she was in rehab, and um, she was having one of her doctors prescribe her some like off-label medicine that was not rehab approved. But that's what we do, like the pain drives us to such a point where, I would have done anything to numb out. And that's what powerlessness is. But what was I really running from? Like, what's underneath that? I had no idea at the time. how deep this process really was, how much there was to uncover about my past trauma, all the wounds that I had gotten. Like, I love to consider the spiritual malady today as a way of looking at my disease, the underlying issues of my disease, right? This hole in my soul that is just, I don't feel right. I'm uncomfortable. I'm constantly looking outside of myself to fill that hole with things, right? Human things, whether it's money, whether it's power, whether it's attention, whether it's love, whether it's, I could keep going on. And that's why they have so many 12-step programs, because everybody, including myself, I felt trained. I was programmed to look outside of myself for a solution. And I tried for many years to do that, and it didn't work. And it was a blow, like that first step experience, when I realized that, like, I'm I have a serious problem. Nothing is working, right? Even in sobriety, even after putting down the drink and drug and stuff, I could be just as miserable in sobriety as I am when I'm drinking and drugging. And at least then I don't have to feel the pain, right? But how do I learn to live life on life's terms? How do I fill this hole in my soul? How do I get to a place where I can be comfortable in my own skin, and I can really trust and rely on God? Because, it's easy to say, but when push comes to shove, actually living this way of life where I'm trusting and relying on a higher power is very painful. It's very hard. It's very difficult. I don't have what my numbing agents anymore, right? So, but if I can't continue to run from those wounds either, I've experienced a lot of trauma in my life. A lot of people have. I was I went through, life with a family that really wasn't present and harmed me many times. Not that that's an excuse, but it those wounds are still there, right? They don't just go away overnight because I do an inventory, I share it with somebody, right? And I say a 7-step prayer. I wish it was that easy. And that is the beginning of the process. But the real healing for me, came later, came through the continuous living of the steps. How do I bring God into those moments when, from my past, that are still suffering? If inventory shows me the truth, right, that's when I start to see what I've been running from. Then it's really not laid out necessarily in the big book how to bring God into those moments. And I've been lucky enough to have been guided to, a lot of inner healing practices and Christian healing ministries, where they were able to start to teach me different techniques and ways to go further with this work, because God doesn't just take us through this process and then say, okay, adios, you're on your own, right? He's going to continue to direct us towards other things, other ways, other information, so that we can continue to grow closer to him. And that's what happened to me. That's what my experience was. And today I feel extremely blessed to be able to utilize some of these techniques in the inventory process and praying into the inventory process. I don't know as a sponsor, right, what to do or what to say to somebody who has experienced trauma in their past. If you've been sexually molested, I can't fix that, right? It's not my job to fix that. But um, how do I help assist, right, to bring God into that moment for the other person so that that wound can start to heal, right, by God's love, not anything I'm doing or saying. I mean, I wish what I did or said, could do that, but ultimately God is the power behind all of this. I don't have the ability to heal anybody. And when I go into inventory now and the truth starts to be revealed, now I can look at these wounds and I can see that it's not something that's meant to heal overnight. It's not something that's meant to be just like a one-shot deal, right? Like, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I've written plenty of inventory on my mother, right? Those are deep wounds. Those are not things that are gonna, and then as a result, right, when I go to step 6 and 7, and this is just my practice, this isn't right or wrong or indifferent, but after I share my inventory in my 5th step, I start to not only take the objectionables, but I look at the root causes, the delusions and the fears. And when I take that hour with my higher power in step 6, I write down prayers for myself that I want to start to pray each and every day moving forward, right? A 7-step prayer, I say that too, but that's not enough. Doing this once and then dropping it, right? I'll be writing inventory on the same thing 2 weeks later. But I really need God to be in this stuff. And it needs to be at the forefront of my mind each morning so that God can change me. Because real change is not about changing for 2 weeks and then going back, right? This takes time and it takes effort and it takes patience. Because a lot of the time, right, I want God to just come in, do the job, let's move on to bigger and better things. And that's not the reality. The reality is that it does take time and that's okay. But it is my responsibility today to bring God to those spaces where I have been scared to look, that have been buried so far deep down that I've been avoiding them most of my life. And it's interesting because I'm always careful about what I pray for, because when I start praying that, God, heal me from this, heal me from that, God, heal me of my fear that my body image, my body dysmorphia, whatever, right? Well, then all of a sudden it's like I start going down this path and God starts revealing more and more to me about why I need to walk through this and maybe gain a few pounds. And that's okay, right? It's not fun. But recently what I've been going through, right, is I had an eating disorder when I was 16. I always wanted to be skinny as a rail. That was my thing, right? I didn't go to the gym because the gym meant a higher number on the scale. Well, you know, then I'd start to freak out in my head, obsess about the number of the scale on the scale, and my whole day would be ruined because I'd be crazy. I'd be driven back to that point of insanity or separation, right? Where I'm not trusting and relying on God. But as I was praying, right, for God to heal me of this past eating disorder, these wounds that were instilled in me by my parents, um, it meant that I would have to refeel these really difficult things. I was going to have to reopen a lot of these wounds so that God could be brought into them. And an example of this, right, is when I have this memory of when I was a kid, and we would always go out for Chinese. If there's a Chinese restaurant, my dad loved the restaurant, whatever. And he would pull over on the road on the way home and throw up in front of everybody. It was just a normal thing, right? It was just a normal part of our family dynamic, was like dad couldn't keep down dinner and he would pull over and throw up. And as a result of that, right, I thought that was normal. My family thought that was normal. Both my sister and I both had issues with bulimia as a result of that, because we grew up watching our father do it all the time. And my mother, actually. My mother she was a little bit more secretive about it, and then she would be, they'd be shaming everybody else about how their appearance, and look at her, did you see her? She's fat, and that, and it was like I was destined to go down the same path that both my parents went down. It was like generational. And when I started to pray into that generational healing as well, and start to ask God to heal, right, the genetics that have been passed on to me as a result of what both of my parents suffered from as well. It was something I'd never heard before. It was something I really didn't understand, but I really didn't have anything to lose by just giving it a try. And as a result of that, right, I don't have that issue anymore. Right. The food was always something that was really difficult that I would come back to. I'd be really spiritually fit and I'd be good. And then it would be back. And then I'd be really spiritually fit, and then it would be the food. It was always the food. But even today, now I've been praying about this, and, I've put on a lot of weight. I don't know how much weight is muscle, and I don't know how much weight is fat, right? But I am totally uncomfortable. And that's okay, right? Because if I don't walk through this, if I don't set aside everything I think I know, right, then God can't teach me. He can't show me whatever it is that he's trying to show me. Right. And ultimately, what I believe that is that he loves me regardless. That it doesn't matter what I look like. It doesn't matter the number on the scale. It doesn't matter whether it's fat or muscle. It doesn't matter. Ian's calling me jacked now, and I'm like, don't call me jacked. My husband. And it's just, it's one of those triggers too. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm freaking out. But unless I experience it, right, with God holding my hand through it, then I'm really never going to get better. It's just going to be this temporary relief. And I know enough about sobriety and my experience that I don't just want temporary relief anymore. Temporary relief isn't real, right? I need to experience God. I need to experience that love. I need God to come into those wounds, right? So that he can heal them in whatever way he sees fit. And I don't know what that looks like, right? What it probably looks like is my husband calling me jacked right now because it makes me uncomfortable, right? And then I'm like, I start to get a little crazy, but I have been through this stuff enough to know that there is a God there that I can turn to in this moment, that I don't have to go down that spiral of insanity, that, but I do have to utilize, right, his presence in my life. I can't I can't just put him in a box on the side, um, and think that I've got this. Like every moment that I start to feel that spiritual malady, I have a responsibility to myself to invite God in. He's already there, but I need to acknowledge him. I need to have his love, right? It's not even about him. He is love. And like, that's the only way I'm really, really going to have the spiritual malady overcome. That's where the real healing is going to come from. That's where the deep wounds, right? They can heal, but only with God's help. And it's painful. I remember when I was sitting down and I was going through some of my trauma stuff, and the guy I was talking to, he was like buckle up, are you ready? Are you ready to really look at this stuff? Because it's not fun. It's not. But that it's freeing. It's freeing. It's freedom. And there comes a point, I think, after going through the steps and after developing this relationship with God, where the freedom is more important, right, than the temporary pain that I might have to go through. And I'm just really grateful that I've learned all of this, and that now I can start bringing these healing practices, right, into AA, and making it that much stronger, right? I don't think it's a coincidence the people that are guided to me, to sponsor them, a lot of them have are stuck. It's very easy to get stuck. And, that's when my eyes become open to like how God is guiding me, right, to help others, and thinking outside the box and not being limited to just the steps, because it is just the beginning of this process. And like I said, I'm really grateful to have been guided in this direction. And I know you guys have a lot of experience around, doing LifeLab and the steps, and it's just so valuable. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say. Thanks.